Now coming to the applied aspect part of the learning and memory, there are two terms. One is amnesia and the second is dementia. So amnesia is the loss of the memory. Okay, it means loss of the memory, and dementia is it's a kind of a, we can say, the clinical syndrome. Because of the loss of the memory, the person will have other difficulties, means his normal day-to-day functioning will be affected because of the loss of the memory. Like in the case of progressive impairment in cognitive property, like to keep care of himself and all other things, like the functional, we can say the exact word is the functional impairment because of loss of the memory. Okay, that is the dementia. So this amnesia, it can be either the anterograde or the retrograde. Anterograde means inability of an individual to acquire new memory. Means, say a person is suffering from the anterograde, so whatever the memory he has stored in the previous events, the previous life, okay, like we can say the person is suffering from the anterograde amnesia from today onward. This is like a very crude example, but to make you understand the thing, the anterograde amnesia means after a certain time the person is not able to acquire the new memory, but doesn't have any problem with having or retrieving the previously stored memory. That is the anterograde amnesia. Retrograde means the inability of the individual to recall certain past memories. Means amnesia, it depends on like for how much longer duration that retrograde amnesia is there. Like we took the example of the brain concussion only for up to 2 to 3 or 2 to 5 minutes prior to the accident. So that 2 to 5 minute retrograde amnesia was there. Okay, so similarly retrograde amnesia, it can happen due to any sort of the abnormality, like in the temporal lobe damage, there will be the temporal lobe amnesia. Memory of the distance past might be lost. Now coming to the dementia, mainly the major is the senile dementia. Means this senile dementia, it is kind of the functional impairment happening to a particular person due to the aging process. Like in the after the 60s or the 70s, a certain level of the cognitive impairment and the certain level of the impairment of the memory happens. And this senile dementia, it's not like quite normal. We cannot say that this is the normal aspect of the aging process. Some people are less prone to have the senile dementia, though some people are more prone to have this senile dementia. So depending on the most important form of one of the senile dementia is Alzheimer disease. Now what is the Alzheimer disease? Before going to like what is the Alzheimer disease, let me tell you something about to understand the pathophysiology of this thing. See, if a particular cell is there, what happens in a particular cell? There are certain different components of the cell. There will be the nucleus, right? There will be the mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, certain everything will be there, cell organelle, and this cell is functioning quite normally. And what is happening inside it? There are certain proteins synthesis is happening, right? Like say for the cytoskeleton structure, the microtubule, there are the molecular motor, these proteins are getting synthesized, and with time new proteins are getting synthesized and old proteins, they are getting destroyed, right, or metabolized. So for this protein to get destroyed or metabolized, it needs there is a process that is called as proteasome, right? Proteasome. This proteasome, it's kind of a machine. Like the protein, it enters to the proteasome, and there will be the component, certain polypeptides. Like say this is a long of 300 amino acid protein formed. It will get fragmented into its constitutive, whatever the amino acids are there. Those amino acids will be reused by the cell machinery to synthesize the new proteins, right? But this proteasome, which degrades the old proteins, it needs these protein to certainly marked, like they should have certain sort of the stamp attached to it, like say that's green color, this red was the protein and this green color is certain that stamp, only then it can get entry into the proteasome. And this green color certain stamp is called as ubiquitin. Ubiquitin. So a certain protein which needs to get destroyed or degraded by the proteasome into its constitutive components, it needs to be ubiquitinated. Ubiquitin is a kind of a protein itself that is present in the cell that will get attached to the damaged or old protein so that it can be broken down its constitutive parts, and again those parts can be used for the synthesis of the new protein. But if there happens to be any problem with the ubiquitin, if it is not present or it is in lesser amount, or if this protein gets synthesized in higher concentration as compared to the ubiquitin, what will happen? That protein, old protein that is of no use, won't be able to get broken down it's into constitutive components, so it will keep on getting accumulated within the cell. And if an unnecessary thing keeps on getting accumulated within the cell, what it will do? It will start an inflammation process and ultimately this cell will die down. So that is the basis of this senile dementia Alzheimer disease, right? The basis of the senile dementia Alzheimer disease. If we look at this flow chart, this is just a very brief aspect of the Alzheimer disease, like the aggregation of the certain peptide is happening, and this aggregation of the certain peptide, it will form the extracellular plaque. Those are called as senile plaque. With this, those plaques, extracellular plaques, which are surrounded by altered fibers, and because of that there will be the inflammation reaction and the oxidative damage, and which will ultimately lead to the formation of the those nerve fiber, the cytoskeleton part of the nerve cell, into that certain name has been given, the neurofibrillary tangle, and ultimately there will be the loss of the synapse and the neurons, and the important aspect is the cholinergic neurons, they will get destroyed in the cerebral cortex and the hippocampus. And if we go more specific, it gets damaged in the nucleus basalis of Maynard. That is one area of the basal forebrain. There is no need to go into detail, so much of detail, like the Alzheimer topic disease. It is a topic of the medicine or the pathology part. Okay, just to make you understand how this senile dementia happens. That's why I am talking about this Alzheimer disease. So ultimately there will be the loss or the decrease of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. That will lead to the generation of this, like these neuron cells within the nucleus basalis of Maynard. What is this? This is a part of basal forebrain. In the basal forebrain, okay, basal forebrain, there will be nucleus basalis of Maynard. There will be the loss of the neurons over here. Normally what happens, let me tell you, normally what happens, like in the nerve cell, a particular neuron, if we try to draw the diagram of particular neuron, okay, particular neuron, it has got certain structures, right? It has got certain proteins attached to it, and certain part of those proteins, it is present on the extracellular component. Okay, like a particular cell is there and it has got the cell membrane, the constitutive transmembrane proteins are there, every cell has got. Similarly the neuron has got these proteins. So these proteins, they need to be replaced with time, right? So who helps in replacing these proteins? New proteins are getting synthesized, they will come over here and old will get destroyed. For the old to get destroyed, it should be ubiquitinated, and ultimately the proteasome will destroyed due to certain things. Say a person who has got certain genetic predisposition for, like say there is one protein, out of this protein, one protein is a beta amyloid precursor, protein, amyloid precursor protein. This is normal. If it is getting synthesized in normal amount, get destroyed at the appropriate time, it is a normal component, APP protein. And for the destruction, I said the proteasome. Now there are certain enzymes within the proteasome, the alpha secretase, beta secretase, or the gamma secretase for the degradation of this APP. If this APP gets degraded by the alpha secretase, then the broken down components, they won't be toxic to the cell. But if it gets broken down by the beta or the gamma secretase, the size of those broken down components will be larger and it will become toxic to the neuron, okay, to the parent neuron or the surrounding neuron too. So certain people who are having the more predisposition or the more amount of the beta in the gamma secretase instead of the alpha, normally there should be the more amount of the alpha secretase, but certain individuals who has got the genetic predisposition or throughout the life some exposure to something happened, ultimately the beta secretase and gamma secretase activity will be increased, and that will degrade this amyloid precursor protein into toxic component that will be toxic to the parent neuron as well as to the surrounding neurons. And how it becomes toxic? The one of the mechanism of being toxicity is these components, they get attached to the AMPA receptor. If you can recall back, the AMPA receptor was opening up after the attachment of the glutamate neurotransmitter, right? After the attachment of the glutamate neurotransmitter. But now these components of amyloid precursor protein, they will get attached to the AMPA, and in turn they will open up the AMPA. Normally the AMPA receptor is supposed to get opened up via the glutamate release. Now there is no need for the glutamate release. APP, the constituent component, they are toxic, they will get attached, and they are of this certain shape that they will open up the AMPA. So continuous bombardment or opening of this AMPA receptor will ultimately lead to this cell. Initially there might be depolarization, increased depolarization, but everything, excess of everything is bad, right? So continuous depolarization will ultimately tire out or burn out this cell, and this cell will get dead, okay, broken down. So there will be the inflammatory mediator coming over there. They will also get affect they will also affect the other surrounding neuron. So ultimately there will be the loss of these neurons, and most importantly these neurons are the cholinergic neurons which are getting damaged in the nucleus basalis of the Maynard. So that is the pathophysiology of Alzheimer disease, and the person who is having this certain tendency to form these neurotoxic protein component, they have got this Alzheimer disease. So they will have the short-term memory loss, their cognitive function will be impaired, they will with age they will get affected more and more. Initially there will be just the loss of the memory for the recalling of the words or the name, but with time that impairment of the memory will be more extensive, and ultimately the person might not be able to live his life normally on its own. It will need the help of the other person. So that's regarding the Alzheimer disease.